I was 65 the night the truth ripped through my quiet little house in Clearwater, Florida, and if you'd told me years earlier that it wouldn't be a business scandal or a heart attack but a maid with chipped red nail polish who would undo me, I'd have laughed. But there I was gripping the oak banister as she whispered, "Your wife isn't supposed to be home yet," and kissed me before I could even breathe. And that's how it began. That's the hook that still claws at me. Because I can't untangle when duty ended and desire started. All I know is that Rosa, yes, that was her name, not some generic Maria or Carla, but Rosa with the strange lilting accent from El Paso, walked into my life to dust shelves and polish glass and left having taken my vows, my dignity, maybe even the last pieces of my marriage. And I'm telling you this not because I'm proud but because the silence is heavier than the shame. I met her in late spring when the air already smelled of salt and sun lotion. My wife had insisted we needed extra help around the house since she was traveling to New York to care for her sister recovering from surgery, and I agreed mostly out of convenience. But the first time Rosa bent to pick up a forgotten receipt that had slipped from my pocket, the one from a men's store in Tampa where I had bought myself a jacket I never admitted, I saw in her eyes a recognition that made me uncomfortable. Like she knew I had secrets even before she cleaned a single room. She wasn't young in the way people imagine maids in cheap movies, she was 40. Maybe 42, with a tired grace, hair pulled back too tight. A small scar near her temple you only noticed if the sun hit just right. And hands rough from chemicals yet delicate when she folded the dish towels. She smelled of citrus cleaner and sometimes cinnamon. And that combination stuck in my mind until I couldn't separate it from her voice. At first it was nothing, small talk about the weather. Her son who worked nights at a gas station off US 19. Her late mother whose rosary beads she kept in her apron pocket, but then she started lingering in the doorway when I watched the evening news, asking questions about stories she pretended not to understand. And one humid Friday she stood too close behind me, pointed at the TV screen where the mayor was speaking, and her breath grazed my ear in a way that wasn't accidental. That's when I should have stepped back, but I didn't. Maybe because my wife's calls from New York were short, distracted, filled with her sister's medical updates, or maybe because I was selfish and lonely. But I let Rosa place her hand on my shoulder. And when she did it again 2 days later I didn't move. I just let the silence thicken until it was almost a dare. By June the house felt like it belonged to her rhythm, her humming in Spanish drifting down the hallway, her habit of turning the blinds slightly to let slivers of sunstripe across the carpet, her way of placing my coffee mug always to the right side of the counter though I'd left it on the left. She was rewriting the map of my home without asking permission. And I didn't resist. The first real break came on a Sunday evening. My wife had extended her stay another week. And I found Rosa sitting at the dining table after her shift, not cleaning, not packing up. Just sitting with a notebook open, scribbling words I couldn't read, and when I asked, she looked up with that half smile and said, "I write what I see, so I don't forget." I asked if I was in her notebook, and she didn't answer, she just closed it slowly, stood, and kissed me in a way that erased all questions. That kiss was salt and lemon, cleaning product and sweat, desperation wrapped in defiance. And I should have stopped it, I should have thought of the 40 years with my wife. The children grown, the reputation I carried in town as a retired insurance broker who still played golf on Wednesdays, but I didn't. I pulled her closer and let everything crumble in that moment. After that we became reckless in ways only fools do. We kissed in the laundry room while the dryer rattled. She left her scarf on my bed once, and I lied saying it was my daughter's when my wife came back earlier than expected. We even used my office desk, the same one where I kept tax records and photographs of my grandchildren, and I swear the smell of furniture polish will forever be tangled with guilt. It wasn't love, not really, though in the heat of it I told myself it was, but it was hunger. The kind that makes you eat even when you're full, and Rosa knew it too. Because sometimes after we finished she'd whisper, "Don't promise me anything." I've heard enough promises in my life, and that should have warned me. But the undoing didn't come from my wife catching us in bed or a neighbor spotting us through the blinds. It came in the smallest, cruelest way. One Tuesday morning I found my bank card missing, only to discover charges at a boutique in downtown St. Pete, women's clothes far too expensive for a maid's salary. And when I confronted Rosa, she didn't deny it, she just said softly, "I wanted to look like someone you'd admit to having," and in that sentence she gutted me. Because I realized I had hidden her like a stain while she was risking everything. My wife found the receipts 2 days later when she balanced our joint account. And the explosion that followed wasn't cinematic, it was cold, precise. Like she'd been waiting for proof, and when she asked me directly I didn't lie, I couldn't. I just sat there while she packed a suitcase and said she was going back to New York. Maybe for good. Rosa disappeared too, left her apron hanging on the back of a chair. Notebook gone, number disconnected, and I never saw her again. But every time I pass that chair the wood seems heavier. As if it remembers what I can't forget. People think affairs end with slammed doors and screaming matches, but mine ended in silence. An empty chair and the faint smell of cinnamon and bleach that lingered for weeks. And maybe the worst part is that I still don't know if Rosa cared for me at all or if I was just another page in her notebook of things not to forget. So yes, she wasn't just the maid, she became my undoing. And I am left telling this in one long breath because if I stop, if I try to cut it into neat pieces, it will sound like a story. When in truth it was the slow unspooling of a man who thought he was too old to be tempted, too careful to be caught, and ended up wrong on both counts. I thought ending it with silence would mean it was over. But the silence itself became unbearable, gnawing at the walls of my Clearwater house until I swore I could still hear Rosa humming in the kitchen, though she was long gone, and my wife's absence was a heavier ghost. Her side of the closet half empty, perfume bottles missing from the dresser. Her calls reduced to one-word updates about her sister's recovery. No mention of when she'd return, if at all, so I drifted through June like a man half erased, clinging to habits that no longer anchored me. At night I found myself replaying every careless move, her scarf on my bed, the lipstick stain on a water glass, the boutique charges that exposed me, and I wanted to believe it was lust clouding my judgment. But deep down I knew I'd crossed the line because I wanted to. Because the quiet years with my wife had made me mistake stability for love. And Rosa had offered me noise, reckless and dangerous but alive. One afternoon while rummaging through drawers for a spare checkbook, I discovered Rosa's forgotten notebook wedged behind the dining room hutch. And my hands trembled as I opened it, pages filled with uneven Spanish scrawls. Occasional English phrases like, "He doesn't see me," "Kisses taste like lies," "undoing." And there, halfway through, a sketch of my house, my silhouette at the window, drawn in sharp black lines that made me shiver, as if she had been documenting me, not loving me. I told myself to burn it, to throw it out. But instead I slid it under my mattress, visiting it at night like some twisted relic. Searching for meaning, wondering if I was her story or just a cautionary note in someone else's. Survival. The unraveling deepened when my neighbor, Frank, a retired cop with a nose for trouble, stopped me on the lawn and asked if everything was all right. Said he'd seen the cleaning lady arguing with a man in a black SUV parked down the street weeks earlier, and though I nodded like it was nothing, my gut twisted. Realizing I'd never asked Rosa about her life beyond what she'd offered, her son at the gas station, her scar, her humming, and maybe all of that was half-truth. Maybe she carried secrets heavier than mine. I couldn't shake the thought of that SUV. Of a man I'd never met who knew her better than I did. And suddenly every kiss felt like a transaction, every whisper rehearsed. And yet my chest ached to see her again, to demand answers I wasn't sure I wanted. When my wife finally called and said flatly, "I'm not coming back until you figure out who you are without her," I knew she didn't just mean Rosa, she meant the hollowness I'd carried for years. The complacency that had rotted our marriage long before the maid arrived. And so I sit here with this notebook, reading her words over and over, undoing, 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 as if she knew the title of my life's final chapter before I did. As if she wrote the hook that would drag me under. And I wonder if the real betrayal wasn't of my wife but of myself. For mistaking destruction for desire. And letting a woman who wasn't just the maid become the mirror that showed me what I had always been hiding. I thought the worst was over when my wife stayed in New York and Rosa vanished. But the real descent began with the phone call I never expected. A block number late at night, a woman's voice low, urgent, saying, "You don't know what she left behind," before hanging up, leaving me staring at the ceiling fan as it spun shadows across my empty bedroom. My heart pounding like I was being chased. And the next morning when I checked under my mattress, the notebook was gone. As if someone had slipped into the house while I slept, stealing the only piece of Rosa I still had, and I couldn't decide if it was her, my wife, or someone else entirely. My paranoia grew claws. I started noticing the black SUV again, idling down the block, engine humming as if waiting for me to step outside. And once I swore I saw a hand lift a phone, recording me as I carried groceries in. But when I walked toward it, the car rolled away slow, deliberate. Like it wanted me to know it wasn't done. I tried telling myself I was imagining it, but then Frank, my neighbor, mentioned casually that strangers had asked about Rosa, a man and a younger woman. Neither looking like police, more like debt collectors. And suddenly fragments from Rosa's murmurs, her son, her scar, her warning not to promise, tangled into a story I didn't want. Maybe she hadn't just been a maid, maybe she'd been running, hiding. And I had been too blinded by my hunger to see the danger. Nights became unbearable, the silence swollen with phantom footsteps. And once I woke certain someone had been in the kitchen. The back door slightly ajar though I'd locked it, a faint smell of cinnamon in the air. The same smell Rosa carried, and I stood there gripping the counter like an old fool, whispering her name, half begging, half cursing. My wife's voice on the phone turned colder each time she called, her patience eroding. Until one evening she said, "You sound like a man waiting for ghosts instead of fixing what's alive," and hung up, leaving me clutching the receiver like it could explain why my life was unraveling faster than I could stitch. The real breaking point came when I found an envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. No stamp, no handwriting, just plain white. And inside was a single torn page from the notebook, my silhouette at the window, but this time there was an addition, a second figure drawn behind me, taller, darker, watching. And beneath it the word, undoing, written in thick black ink. That's when I realized Rosa hadn't disappeared from my story, she'd pulled me into hers. And whatever she was running from had now found me. And suddenly I wasn't just a man who cheated on his wife with a maid. I was a man marked by something I didn't understand. And the twist of it all was that I still wanted to see her again. Even if it meant the end of me.